Hi, I'm Terry Carter, and I am doing this recording for American Christian Heritage. Um, and this is for the discussion board on recent scholarship. And I'm going to be talking about John Winthrop's City of Women by Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. I chose the work uh, largely because I read her book Homespun several years ago when it first came out. I was interested in the topics, not so much for the exploration of gender roles as much as the fact that someone was taking needlework seriously. Needlework should be taken somewhat seriously because for centuries it was the only art form that women were allowed, and I think it sometimes gets short shrift in our culture. But in the essay, Ms. Ulrich looks at women who stepped out of the norm and how Governor Winthrop reacted to them. In some instances, he just seemed perplexed, and in some instances, he seemed personally insulted or affronted by the things that they did. But I want to talk a little bit on the side of that about a different issue, and that is the concept of agency and how it is being applied in modern historiography. Using the online version of the Oxford University Lexicon, which is the online version of the Oxford English Dictionary, agency is defined as an action or intervention producing a particular effect. One of the sentences they use to give illustration to the meaning is, I may sit and may will forever that yonder chair come to me, but without the direct agency of my body, it must remain where it is. In The Problem of Women's Agency in Late Medieval and Early Modern Europe, which is the larger culture that Puritanism emerges from, Martha Howell questions the current discussion on the topic of agency. She looks at studies of women from England, France, and Denmark performing in non-traditional gender roles. There are multiple studies cited of women who appear to step out of the gender role assigned to them by the patriarchal hegemony. The question being, is it agency? And at what point does it become historical agency? Does intent or effect matter, or is it just the act itself that can be counted as agency regardless of its intent or effect? Two interesting examples are that of women in the food trades in late medieval and early modern Europe. The food trades at this point are controlled by guilds led by men, and most of them did not allow women to be members of the guild or to be traders. However, in Lyon, France, the evidence in the study suggests that these women entered the market illegally for the most part, not in search of the power and autonomy that we associate with entrepreneurial status in market economies, but simply as a result of their need for income or their obligation to help out in a family shop. Howe also refers to a study of women in Copenhagen who acquired legitimate positions in the market as representatives of a husband who was incapacitated or as widowed heads of household. Looked at in this way, these women were rendered agents, i.e. violators of patriarchal norms that would exclude them from certain market sectors by way of their position in families, by raw economic needs, or by a combination of both. In these circumstances, the women were working in the margins of an established system with the consent of the male authorities. The male authority remained. There's no evidence that the women changed the rules or that their gender, the gender of the authorities changed. There's no reason to suggest that the women intended any such change. They were simply doing what they had to do for the needs of their families. So in assigning agency, does intent matter? In the work by Richard Judd, we see the example of those living on the New England frontier. The family labor system was the engine of the farm ecology. Chores were divided loosely according to age and gender, and with men and boys working in the fields and woodlots, and women and girls in the kitchen, garden, and barnyard, what we traditionally say are men's work and women's work. But women at times worked with their husbands in the fields. They slaughtered fowl, they smoked and dried meat, they brewed beer, they made apple cider, they harvested crops, and they did that for either their own family's use or to barter with others, or to sell outright on a market. And all this while maintaining the hearth, the meals, and the children. Women frequently had to cross the gender role line on the frontier, but is that agency? There is no evidence that these women were trying to escape the patriarchal norms. They continued in the gender roles despite doing tasks that would normally be thought of as masculine. They did not change the overall patriarchal nature of the political or economic structure of their culture. Ulrich points out that Winthrop largely ignored their contribution. During the Depression of 1641, brought on by the English Civil War, the people had to make many of the things that they normally had been importing. Ulrich quotes Winthrop, "Man began to look about them and fell into manufacture," that is, making things themselves. But he doesn't talk about the women. He doesn't mention the women. And they would have been part of this process. So the government did not acknowledge the contributions of women as part of surviving a difficult time. So are the women who took on any number of traditionally masculine tasks agents? The concept of agency still needs to be fleshed out for it to create a more solid foundation for historiography and academic study. Thank you.